Sound check, 1, 2, 3, 4, sound check.
We'll start that again. Welcome, everyone. Before we begin our meeting, I just want to highlight a couple of things. As we're finishing off the month of February, we're celebrating Ontario Heritage Week, and there's been a lot of great events that have happened within the city and across the province, so we want to highlight that has taken place this month, as well as February is the month of Black History Month, and I hope everyone takes the opportunity to visit the exhibit that's out in City Hall celebrating Black History Month, and it's really a fabulous exhibit that's been out there and put together. As we have quorum present for today's meeting, I'd like to call this meeting of the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee to order. As a reminder, all electronic devices should be switched to a non-audible function during our committee meetings. We'll now go through our roll call. If I could get everyone to please acknowledge their presence. As I announce their names, Councillor Kretsch.
I'm here virtually. Good to see you.
Karen Burke.
Present.
Graham Carroll.
Present.
Andrew Douglas.
Present.
Lynn Lundstedt.
Present.
Andy McLaren.
Present.
Stefan Spalnick. I see Stephanie, he's right there. Thank you, everyone, and we'll now move on to the approval of the agenda. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as presented?
I see Andy and Graham.
Are there any amendments from the committee members to the agenda? We have Graham. Go ahead, Graham.
I'd like to add to it to get a report on the present status of the action on the mayor's vacant heritage structures. Find out what happened with Councillor Cassar's motion regarding Mar Filippo House. We haven't heard it in a while, but I wonder if there's anything going on with the Sand House, the past medical superintendent's residence, if the staff has any updates on that. The status of the former maternity wing at 711 Concession Street. And going back to an old meeting, there's supposed to be a report on the provincial planning statement actions. Has this been completed? Has it been brought forward? Or is this the one we discussed last week? We're talking about the last meeting, sorry, where we talked about breakout of protected lands from designations. Thank you.
Those items can be raised in our general information and other business.
Sounds good. Is that fine, Carol? Okay. All right. As we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. We now move on to our declarations of interest. Are there any declarations today? Seeing none, we move on to item 5, which is our approval of the minutes of our previous meeting for January 24th, 2025. May I please have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes as presented?
I see Lynn and Karen.
Okay, and before we move to vote, is there any discussion on those meeting notes? Seeing none, as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. Items for information. May I please have a mover and a seconder to receive the items for information? We have before us 7.1, which is PED 25072, which is delegated approvals respecting heritage permit applications, and there is a list of application numbers. And 7.2, which is our policy and design working group meeting notes from September 9th, 2024. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive?
I saw Councillor Kretsch, I believe, and Graham.
And is there any discussion on any of these items? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. We move now to our items for consideration. We have before us item 8.1, PED 25033, which is the recommendation to designate 1175 Main Street East in Hamilton Memorial Public School under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, Ward 3. So we have Scott Dickinson, the Cultural Heritage Planning Technician, is here to give us a presentation. Welcome, Scott.
Pardon me. Good afternoon, everyone. Scott Dickinson, Cultural Heritage Planner, and this is Report PED 25033, the recommendation to designate 1175 Main Street East, Hamilton Memorial Public School. Come on, computer. This property is located at the northwestern corner of the intersection of Main Street East and Ottawa Street North in the Crown Point West neighborhood in the city of Hamilton. It was first surveyed for potential heritage interest in the 1980s, and in 2014, council directed staff to conduct a preliminary evaluation of the subject property, as well as the nearby W.H. Ballard Public School. As a result of this evaluation, this property was placed on the Municipal Heritage Register and was listed as a low priority on staff's designation work plan. In March of 2023, it was reprioritized for designation by January 1st, 2025, and in March of 2024, staff met with representatives of the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board to discuss this upcoming designation and to photo document the interior and exterior of the subject property. Staff recommend designation for this property under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, as it meets 8 of the 9 criteria laid out under Ontario Regulation 9-06. What follows is a high-level summary of those 8 criteria. This 2-story brick-clad school built in 1919 is a representative example of a collegiate Gothic school, which is also a rare example of a school designed around a central auditorium in Hamilton, and a rare surviving example of a school built to commemorate the dead of the First World War. This feature is typical of the collegiate Gothic style, which represented at this school, at this of the subject property include its brick facades with stone molding, banding, and coining, its crenellated brick parapet with stone decorative elements, its projecting central and side entrances with elaborate carved stone decorative elements. It is one of 3 public schools in Hamilton to have a central auditorium design with an overhead skylight, the other 2 being the former Princess Elizabeth School, built 1922, and W.H. Ballard, also built 1922. This property displays a high degree of craftsmanship and artistic merit, both in the interior and exterior. Some examples of the exterior elements which show a high degree of craftsmanship include its carved stone decorative elements, the decorative dichromatic brick patterns on the end pavilions, the stone relief over the front entrance reading 1914 Memorial School 1918, the projecting central entrance with its carved stone spindles, pointed arch, and stone molding, bearing the legend, "We gave our today for your tomorrow. We died that you might live." Interior features that show a high degree of artistic merit include the coffered ceiling in the central auditorium, the mural banner reading, "That our youth may ever remember the valiant men of Hamilton who died in the Great War. This school is a memorial." The painted plaques bearing the names of the First World War battles, the coats of arms of the United Kingdom and of Canada, and the 16 bronze plaques, each bearing the names of 132 Hamiltonians who died in the First World War. This property has historical and associative value. It is associated with the theme of Hamilton's early 20th century industrial expansion and with Hamiltonians' desire to memorialize the First World War. At the dawn of the 20th century, Hamilton's East End grew rapidly as an immense industrial expansion was underway. This meant that the East End went from being farmers' fields to a series of new developments. In the Crown Point West neighborhood, one of these new surveys was called Kensington. And here's a plan of Kensington in 1912, and it was a brand new survey. Although a number of schools had already been built in recent years to alleviate the crowding, as this area rapidly developed, there were many new families moving in, and their children needed to go to school somewhere. But although the Board of Education tried their best, they really couldn't keep up with the explosive growth in school-aged children in this area. And so by the spring of 1918, they had settled on building another school for the East End at the corner of Main and Ottawa North. By the late summer and early fall, actually by October of 1918, they had decided that not only should they build a school in this spot, but that it should also be a memorial to the First World War, or rather to the dead of Hamilton of the First World War. Although note that they made this decision actually before the armistice was signed, so the war was still ongoing when they decided that this school should be a memorial. Memorial Public School opened officially on October 18th, 1919 by Edward, the Prince of Wales, although the interior commemorative elements were not dedicated until 1925. These interior elements consist of, again, 16 bronze plaques, each bearing the names of 132 Hamiltonians, 17 painted placards bearing the names of battles in which Canadian troops played an important part, and the coats of arms of both Canada and the United Kingdom. These elements were dedicated in a ceremony on November 18th, 1925, at which General Sir Arthur Currie was the guest of honor. This property also has the potential to yield information that contributes to an understanding of the community of Crown Point West. As a long-standing educational facility built when its surrounding neighborhood was brand new, this school has been a focal point for generations of local students and their families. And of course, this school also demonstrates the work of the prominent Hamilton architect, Gordon J. Hutton. Hutton, who was born in Hamilton and trained in Chicago, designed a number of prominent Hamilton landmarks. Some of the surviving ones include the office building for the Otis Fenson Elevator Company on Victoria Avenue, the Basilica of Christ the King, and two other collegiate Gothic schools along Main Street East, being Delta Secondary and the former Cathedral Boys School at Emerald and Maine. This property has a great deal of contextual value. It is important in defining the character of the Crown Point West neighborhood. The completion of this school in 1919 marked the change of Crown Point West from being a raw new development to an established neighborhood of families and Hamiltonians who. It was also the very last portion of the Kensington survey, the immediate surrounding area, to be filled in. This property has, this property is visually, historically, and functionally linked to its surroundings. It is sited on its original location at the intersection of two major thoroughfares in the middle of the residential neighborhood that it was built to serve. This property was built not only to be a focal point for the immediate surrounding area, but to commemorate all the Hamiltonians who never returned in the First World War. And of course, this large and visually distinctive structure on a prominent corner lot, having been very central to the education and childhood of generations of East End Hamiltonians, is considered to be a local landmark. These criteria are summarized here in the Statement of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest. The full version of this statement can be found in Appendix B of the attached report. Also in Appendix B is the list of heritage attributes, which will inform the writing of a designation bylaw if Council passes staff's recommendations. A high-level summary of some of these heritage attributes. The elevations and roof line of this two-story 1919 school building are identified as having cultural heritage value, including the projecting main entrance on the south elevation with its frontispiece, carved stone tablets, date stone, entryway, this overhead crenellated stone parapet, the recessed gated opening, as well as the dichromatic brickwork on the end pavilions. And on the east and west, on the side elevations, the projecting entrances with their pointed arch door openings, their recessed entrances, their brick and stone decorative elements, and the stone plaques, each with the name of a different famous Canadian soldier of the First World War: Major General Sir Edward Morrison, General Sir Arthur Currie, Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, and Lieutenant Colonel William A. Bishop. Interior features of the 1919 building are centered on the central auditorium with its coffered ceiling, mural banner, painted plaques, the coats of arms, and the 16 bronze plaques. Also on the property is a 1921 annex building built in a sympathetic style. It also has heritage value thanks to its brick facade, its crenellated parapet, its dichromatic brick and carved stone decorations, and its own brick, I already said the parapet, and its horizontal stone banding and stone window surrounds. Staff do not feel that the circa 1970 gymnasium or the single-story 1990 addition have cultural heritage value or interest. And of course, the key contextual attributes of this property include its location at the intersection of Main and Ottawa Street North, the deep setback of the original 1919 building, and the shallow setback of the 1921 building. Staff recommend that the city clerk be given notice of council's intention to designate this property under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. And of course, as this was a high-level overview, we open the floor to questions.
Thank you, Scott. Before we go to questions, I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder to put the report on the floor to allow us to have questions on both the presentation and the report.
I see Andy and Andrew.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Scott? So we've got Andrew, we've got Lynn. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, just a point of curiosity. Is this the only example of a school also being a World War I memorial?
Through the chair, notice we said a rare surviving example. There was, of course, Peace Memorial School on the escarpment. It, of course, no longer exists.
Okay.
Lynn, go ahead.
Through the chair, thank you, Scott. Wonderful presentation as usual. And just to elaborate more on Andy's question, I took a look through the Department of Veteran Affairs military memorials in Canada, trying to find similar schools that were built as memorials. And the only one I found was Memorial University in Newfoundland, in St. John's. There are tons of schools named after veterans, but not purpose-built memorial schools. Of course, this wasn't on the list, so that doesn't mean anything, but I find it also interesting that this is a memorial school and that Greater Hamilton area has 3 of memorial halls, purpose-built memorial halls, and I think there's only 12 or 15 of those across Canada. So I don't know what it is about this area that wanted to memorialize their soldiers in this way, but I think it's great. And this is a beautiful building.
Thank you for those questions. Any other questions for Scott? Or Scott, did you have any further comment?
Oh, just a comment through the chair. Through our research, we found that in the months up to the decision to make Memorial a memorial school, that there was it seemed to be a lot of debate and discussion among Hamiltonians. Certainly the issues of the Spectator in the spring and in the summer and fall of 1918. Well, 2 things. One, people were, it was clear to most people that the war would not last too much longer as Germany crumbled. And 2, that there was a lot of discussion of exactly how they would memorialize this war that was clearly coming to an end. Although most people thought it would end early in 1919, November 11th came as quite a shock to most people. It ended even faster than they thought it would.
Again, thank you. That was a fantastic presentation. Do we have any other questions in regards to the report? So we have before us the recommendation to designate 1175 Main Street East in Hamilton Memorial Public School. Are there any, if there's no other questions, we'll move to the vote. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. We now move on to item 8.2, which is PD 25034, recommendation to designate 801 Dunsmuir Road in Hamilton, which is W.H. Ballard Public School under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, Ward 4. Again, we have Scott Dickinson, Cultural Heritage Planning Technician, is here to give us a presentation.
All right, once again, good afternoon. Scott Dickinson, Cultural Heritage Planner, and this is the recommendation to designate 801 Dunsmuir Road, Hamilton, known as W.H. Ballard Public School. This property occupies the block formed by Dunsmuir Road, Regina Avenue North, Roxborough Avenue, and Weir Street North in the Homeside neighborhood within the city of Hamilton. This property was first surveyed for potential heritage interest in the 1980s, and in 2014, Council directed staff to conduct a preliminary evaluation of both this property and of Memorial Public School nearby. As a result of this evaluation, this property was added to the Municipal Heritage Register and added to staff's designation work plan as a low priority. In March of 2023, it was reprioritized for designation by January 1st, 2025, and in March of 2024, staff met with representatives of the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board to discuss the proposed designation of the property and to photo document the interior and exterior. That sounds very familiar. Staff recommend designation for this property under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act, as it meets 9 of the 9 criteria laid out under Ontario Regulation 9-06. And what follows is a high-level summary. This property has a great deal of design and physical value. This 1922 steel frame, brick-clad structure has design and physical value as a representative example of a collegiate Gothic school, which is also a rare example of a school with a central auditorium. Some features typical of the collegiate Gothic style that are represented here include the shaped brick parapet with carved stone decorations, the building's blind end pavilions with the dichromatic brickwork, its projecting front entrance with rounded bay, and the elaborate decorative stone carvings. And again, this property is one of 3 in Hamilton with a central auditorium design, the other 2 being the former Princess Elizabeth School and nearby Memorial Public School. This property displays a high degree of craftsmanship and artistic merit, or rather, yes, both, with some examples being the brick parapet with capstones and molded cornice, the elaborate main entrance with carved stone details, portico, the rounded stone bay with overhead carved stone parapet, the blind end pavilions with dichromatic brick patterns, and the stone crests and finials atop the parapet. This property also demonstrates a high degree of technical achievement as an early example of steel frame construction as applied to a Canadian school building, and for the design of the 3rd floor. The classrooms over the two-story central auditorium are not supported on structural columns, since those would interfere with the open space of the auditorium, but instead rest directly on the building's steel frame skeleton, which at the time of its construction was noted as being very innovative, there we go, and unusual. This property has a great deal of historical value. It is associated with Hamilton's industrial expansion and with its namesake, Hamilton educator William Henry Ballard. In the early years of the 20th century, as Hamilton's industrial base expanded enormously, the new East End neighborhoods correspondingly expanded as well to house the thousands of workers now being employed in these new plants. And of course, as these workers settled down and had families, there was a pressing need as well for more schools. And despite the Board of Education's best attempts, they simply could not keep up with the massive and growing demand for more educational facilities, which necessitated in 1922 the plan to construct a school just for Homeside. And of course, it also gave the Board of Education the opportunity to commemorate Mr. Ballard. W.H. Ballard was a trained educator who had been active in the Hamilton area for decades. He had held a number of prominent educational positions, including being mathematical master at the Hamilton Collegiate Institute, as well as being a member of the Senate of Toronto University. Ballard had been inspector of public schools in Hamilton since 1885. And you can see that he was able to attend the opening of his namesake school in 1923. This property has the potential to yield information that contributes to an understanding of the Homeside community. This long-standing educational facility, built in the midst of the residential neighborhood it was built to serve, it has been a focal point for generations of Homesiders, especially the younger ones. And of course, this property demonstrates the work of prominent Hamilton architects Frederick Wilson Warren and Reginald Edwards MacDonald. Warren, born and educated in Hamilton, designed a number of prominent buildings, including the former Methodist Church on Grosvenor Avenue North and the now Allenby Lofts on Hunter Street East. Between 1922 and 1929, he partnered with British-born Reginald E. MacDonald, during which time they designed both the subject property and the West End Princess Elizabeth Public School in 1922. Princess Elizabeth School was designated, by the way, under the Ontario Heritage Act in 1992. And of course, these two schools which this team designed are two of the three schools in Hamilton with a central auditorium design with an overhead skylight. I mean, you can see some of that steel structure right here. This property has a great deal of contextual value. It is important in defining the character of Homeside as a long-established residential neighborhood. Just like with Memorial School, the building of W.H. Ballard really cemented the changing character of Homeside from being a new development to a settled residential neighborhood. As well, the property is historically and visually linked to the surrounding area, being sited on its original location and occupying a full block in the midst of this neighborhood. And of course, this large and visually distinctive structure, prominently placed on a large lot which occupies a full block, is considered to be a local landmark. The foregoing is summarized here in this Statement of Cultural Heritage Value or Interest. The full version of the statement is found in Appendix B of the attached report, as is the full version of this description of heritage attributes, which will inform the writing of a designation bylaw if staff's recommendation is passed by council. There's a lot here, so a high-level summary of some of the more interesting features include the main entrance on the south elevation with its arched door opening with elaborate carved details, the portico with plain door columns, the multi-story round stone bay topped with the elaborate carved stone parapet, as well as the east and west side entrances with their own projecting bays, their carved stone door surrounds with reliefs reading either boys or girls, respectively, the dichromatic brick decorations, and their brick pilasters, as well as the projecting brick panels on the end pavilions with dichromatic bricks in a lozenge pattern with carved stone accents, and interior features of the central auditorium, including its steel frame construction and the third-story classroom supported directly on the steel structure over that central auditorium. The 1978 gymnasium addition and the replacement windows in the original 1922 school building are not considered by staff to have heritage value or interest. And the key contextual attributes of this property include its location, filling the block bordered by Dunsmuir, Regina, Roxborough, and Weir Street North, and its moderate setback from the public right-of-way along those streets. Staff recommend that the city clerk be directed to give notice of council's intention to designate this property as under Part 4, of the Ontario Heritage Act. And again, we open the floor to questions from the committee members.
Thank you again, Scott. That was a great presentation. Before we move to questions, may I have a mover and a seconder to put the report on the floor?
I see Graham and Karen.
Okay. Do we have any questions in regards to the presentation or the report? Graham? Go ahead.
Once again, Scott, thank you. You hit it out of the park. It's great to see a nice report like this. And this one kind of touches home to me because my daughter taught at that school for some fill-in classes. She's a recent graduate as a teacher in Ontario. And she remarked at the uniqueness of the school. And she's not one that really pays attention to buildings like I do. But she noticed it herself walking through the interior and described it to me. So she goes, if that can please her, obviously it's going to please everybody. It's just an amazing building.
Thank you, Graham. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to our vote. We have before us the recommendation to designate 801 Dunsmuir Road in Hamilton, W.H. Ballard Public School. As we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. We'll now move on to item 8.3, which is PD 25087, which is the notice of intention to demolish the building located at 46 Ferguson Street South in Hamilton, being a non-designated property listed on the Municipal Heritage Register, Ward 2. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the report on the floor with the recommendations?
I see Andrew And Karen.
Okay. Are there any questions of the committee? Graham? Do we have, and Andrew? Graham?
Yeah, I think the property owner is awfully short-sighted in this demolition. I know the building itself in behind has no major attractiveness to it, but the actual facade of that building along Ferguson Avenue could quite easily be incorporated into a new design and could reflect the history of this building, how the importance of the industrial background of our city. I think it should be preserved, somehow work it into the project and make it a point to save that face. I think it'll be a welcome addition to any building that they could possibly put in.
Andrew?
Yeah, my question was just about the qualifications of the heritage consultant. Because reading through this report, this person either has never seen a heritage building before or is working against heritage for their client's benefit. Because lines like, it's associated with architect Edmund Patterson, who designed manufacturing buildings and industrial buildings, but this industrial building, because it's smaller, doesn't reflect his ideas. That is nonsense. And to say that it doesn't have value because of that is complete nonsense. So I highly question the qualifications of this consultant and whether or not they're actually working in good faith to showcase what the heritage is.
Do staff have any comments in regards to those statements, or?
Through the chair, so Alyssa Golden, Cultural Heritage Program Lead. Just in terms of some information outlined in the staff report, so there was an original Cultural Heritage Impact Assessment prepared. It did go to the Policy and Design Working Group for feedback. At the time demolition was proposed, there was not direction to proceed to designate the property or to take any action in response to that proposed demolition. There were a few questions around the scope of the report and the findings of the report at the time. Staff provided that feedback on, and additional feedback looking for a revised heritage impact assessment that better addressed the alternatives to try to incorporate the building into the development. Ultimately, they were issued site plan control, conditional site plan control approval for the proposed demolition, but recreation of the principal facades of that building, set back from the road to facilitate a road widening as well. So at this point, really this is an administrative process. We have a conditionally approved site plan approval. We've had the heritage impact assessment reviewed previously. We've also had an addendum prepared by a different consultant, which addressed the scope of salvage, commemoration, and interpretation measures, as well as the design measures for the recreated facade in the new development. Staff are satisfied with the outcome of this, although yes, we had also similarly pushed back in terms of trying to see the structure incorporated into the development rather than demolished. This is where we landed, and we do feel as though the scope of not just the commemorative salvage and interpretation measures incorporated, but also that we have also received securities ensuring that the developer does follow through with those as a part of the site plan process.
Any further question or comment? Councillor Crouch?
Sorry, I was muted. Thanks for the context list. I think it's really important for us to keep two things in mind every time we look at these types of things. There are going to be all kinds of professionals who weigh in on the context of heritage assets. Those people may be hired by the city as third-party consultants. They could be hired by developers or other individuals to provide advice. And then our staff evaluates all the advice that's given to them and then brings something here for a recommendation to us. And so I think that's the context in which we make decisions here. I think it's important to say that. I also want to say I'm glad to hear that we're going to be doing some type of conservation and that we're also going to see road widening here. And why does that matter? Well, in this neighborhood specifically, this corridor here, this street is very, very narrow, and it's part of a series of offset streets that don't really connect completely through neighborhoods. And we're getting thousands of new people in the Corktown neighborhood. And so people's ability to move along, people's ability to have a connected cycle network. And actually this street is part of what was originally planned to be a connected pedestrian and cycling network all the way from the south of Hamilton's Road 2 right the way through the north end. So some of this stuff will enable that to happen as well. And so I'm always a fan of trying to keep our industrial heritage intact, especially in the urban core, because I think people don't understand that we had an industrial heritage in the urban core. And so keeping these buildings there is important. But I also understand that this is a long process that's been going on for years. This is where we landed a while back. We're kind of moving that process forward now. And so we can't necessarily go backwards on that at this point. And I'm glad that some of the elements will be preserved so people can still understand what the history of the area was.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have any other questions? Graham, go ahead.
I thought as a city, we were starting to go with traffic calming. We were starting to want to narrow our streets, restrict traffic. So why are we opening the street up to allow more traffic? Isn't that kind of backwards to what the city policy is, what our Main Street policy is going to be, what our Aberdeen Avenue policy is going to be? Isn't this reversing all that?
Go ahead, Councillor Crouch.
Yeah, since I'm the one who made the comment, I'd be happy to reply. So yes, in terms of restricting the space for motor vehicle traffic, sure. But in order to do that, you have to widen the road. So we have a couple of options here. We could close the entire road and make it just for pedestrian and cycling traffic. But if we keep the road opened to motor vehicle traffic, which in this case we probably will, you have to widen the road to provide the extra amenities. As well as you probably know, many of the sidewalks downtown are frighteningly narrow. So having a setback here to be able to expand the roadway doesn't just include the road surface itself, but includes all the amenities that are attached to the road surface. And those could be light standards, hydro poles, sidewalks, right? So the more space you have in width between the building face and the other building face, the more you have a chance to move things around and make an accommodation. So regardless, this is a really narrow roadway. And so moving it back, if it's going to help create more safety, lines of sight, people are going to feel better traveling there. There'll be more lighting, so people are traveling at night can see it, that kind of thing. So I take your point, but I think the issue here is that we're trying to find a compatible use for all road users that's safe. And so in order to, you have to widen the whole space.
Is there any other comments, further discussion? We'll now move to vote. Sorry, Stephen. Go ahead, Stephen.
Just through the chair to Councillor Crutch, are they going to remove the cobblestone on Ferguson when the road gets expanded? I know it's not directly related. I'm just curious.
I don't know the answer to that question. I imagine that during development and construction, they're going to have to, but we have kind of, as you probably know, the cobblestone is not in fantastic shape. And it's not even cobblestone, it's more like interlocking brick at this point, right? So it's an interlocking brick. It's rather a modern thing. I imagine some of it will be removed and then replaced. But yeah, there's the problem with the interlocking brick along the entire stretch of Ferguson. It's on my radar for sure. I imagine some of it will be impacted for sure, and then replacing it will be part of doing that, because it obviously be weird if there was no interlocking brick in this one section, because of course there's some south and some north of it. So thanks for mentioning that and flagging it, though. I'm not sure if it's not really a heritage asset, that brick, but it certainly adds to the shape and feel of the area.
Thank you for that. Any other questions, comments? Otherwise, we'll move to vote. Graham. One more. Okay.
Yeah, we just go back to that historic use of Ferguson Avenue South. They used to have a train track right down the middle of it. So it's not like it ever was used a lot for vehicular traffic. So being closed to vehicles, I don't think is a bad problem. I think it'd be nice to make it as pedestrian practice. I go to the city of Glasgow a lot, and there's all kinds of streets that are closed to vehicles. It's quite normal. Maybe we should be getting into that ourselves here.
Go ahead.
Thanks to the chair. So great, interesting discussion, not necessarily relevant to this committee and this particular report, but I will note that obviously as a part of any planning application process, comments and appropriate policies are reviewed across the entire organization, including transportation master plans, urban design guidelines, other types of initiatives to make sure that new development is consistent with that. So that obviously would have been taken into account as a part of this process.
All right, we'll now move to vote. Is there anyone opposed? We have the recommendation to demolish. Seeing none, that item is carried. We now move on to item 8.4, which is PED 25043. It's our monthly report on proactive listings for the Municipal Heritage Register, February 2025. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the report recommendations on the floor?
I see Andy and Councillor Crutch.
And that recommendation is that staff be directed to list 231 Bay Street North in Hamilton on the Municipal Heritage Register as a non-designated property, as outlined in report PED 25043 in accordance with Section 27 on the Ontario Heritage Act. Is there any questions from the committee in regards to this? If not, we'll move to vote. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, that item is carried. And we now move on to our general information and other business. We have 11.1 is selecting members to attend the 2025 Ontario Heritage Conference being held on June 19th to 21st, 2025 in Prince Edward County. So we're bringing this forward to see if anyone has any interest so that we can do some planning moving forward. We do not have the agenda yet for the event. They have not posted their program, but we wanted just to see if there was any general interest. Graham? Lynn? Okay. I would volunteer. Any other members interested? Okay. So we have 3 volunteers. May I have a mover and a seconder to put forward approving to receive that?
I see Karen and Councillor Crutch.
Okay. Is there any other questions? Anyone opposed? If not, that item is carried. Thank you, everyone. So as we find out more information about the upcoming conference, we can pass that along. Okay. I now am going to turn over chair to talk about Ontario Heritage Week. So Ontario Heritage Week just concluded. Alyssa Golden and myself had the privilege of actually making a presentation at on Hamilton Heritage Day, which took place last Saturday. So we provided a presentation in regards to update on heritage planning in the city, as well as the work that our Municipal Heritage Committee has done over the past year. Thank you to Christopher Redford from the City of Hamilton, all of the staff that were involved in that, as well as the Hamilton Wentworth Heritage Association that put forward and put together a fantastic day's event. It took place at Dundurn Castle in the Coach House, and there was a lot of great presentations, and we learned about some of the events that are happening and some of the municipal heritage properties and how they're going to be coming online and opening. So we learned about the reopening of Griffin House, the Gage House at the Children's Museum, and especially Magnolia Hall, and the success of that project is going to be once it opens. So as we find out those dates for their grand openings, we'll be able to let everybody know. There was also presentations from Doors Open. Doors Open will be taking place on the first weekend of May, and they have put out their call for volunteers. So if there's anyone that's interested, they do have their lineup of sites more or less put together right now, and it's going to be a full focus on adaptive reuse of heritage properties in the city. So that's going to be a very, very good weekend. We also learned too that the Hamilton Wentworth Heritage Association will be having their awards and their general meeting on April 30th at the Coach House at Dundurn at 6 p.m. So that's when they're going to be doing their awards. So we have, as members, we have the opportunity to put forward volunteer awards, 1 or 2 volunteers for nomination for that. So it's something that we can look at doing over the next month. And some other, and I guess 2 of the most important things, our update. We provided update that save the date. Our Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee Heritage Recognition Award celebration will be taking place on Thursday, June 26, 2025. So we let all of the attendees know that, and that information is going to be put out for information. We also noted that we're now opening our call for nominations for the next year's awards, the 2025 awards. That is officially online. Anyone can go in and start making their nominations. We had some hard copy papers there, and we had a few nominations done last Saturday. So that's a good start to our award nomination. But all in all, it was a very good day. Lots of information came of that, and some good contacts and connections made that day.
Thank you, Alyssa. It was a great day. I wish more people would have shown up. I was there and really appreciated what everything that people had done, and hearing all the efforts of other groups. So anyone else have anything to ask or comment on? Seeing none, can we move to a mover and a seconder to receive the update?
I see Stefan and Lynn.
Hey, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carries.
Thank you very much, Graham. So we'll now move on to 11.3, which is our Heritage Buildings and Landscapes watch list. Before we go through the list, are there any additions that anyone would like to make? So we'll start with Graham.
Okay, both an addition and something that we should probably remove.
Okay.
The Gore buildings, saying they don't exist anymore. No sense them being on the list anymore. And I'm hearing that the congregation is looking at closing First Pilgrim Church on Main Street West. That is 200 Main Street, sorry, Main Street East, 200 Main Street East. So it's a registry building, but I think we should probably keep watch on it and see if it is going to close and what's going to happen with it.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Graham. Do we have any other additions or removals? No? Go ahead, Alyssa.
Through the chair, not sure if this is the right moment, but in terms of 200 Main Street East, just noting that that is on our high priority list for designation, and that report is coming forward to the next Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee meeting.
Sorry, could I just get clarification on what property you want to add?
First Pilgrim United Church at 200 Main Street East.
Okay. Is there any discussion in regards to removing the Gore buildings? Okay. May I have a mover and a seconder for those items?
Graham and Karen.
Okay. Any discussion on the Gore buildings being removed from the list? No? Any discussion in regards to adding the First Pilgrim United Church? Seeing none, we'll move to vote. Is there anyone opposed to adding and removing those properties? Seeing none, that item is carried. Okay. Oops. Go ahead. Okay.
Should we put that at yellow?
Oh, yes, we need to determine that.
Yeah. And is that in Ward 2? Do you want to put that on your list, Councillor Crutch? Thank you.
Do we have any updates in regards to the properties on our list today? Graham, Karen? Okay, go ahead, Graham.
I have 5 today. First one is my favorite, St. Giles. The property owner is doing a great job lately, actually, Kindred Works, and keeping the property clean. But Audrey Dover from Kindred Works called me yesterday to inform me that they're going to be using the property for filming for a couple of months beginning early in March. And they'll be letting the area residents know ahead of time, so there's no big surprises. And then another one in the red, 828 Sanatorium Road, the Long and Bisbee building. We've been having urban explorers get back into the building again, posting online. But that does encourage other people to break in to see what they saw. It drives you insane. But I also noticed when checking to see if the building was secure, is that the security has all been removed. The solar panels, battery backup, and cameras were all gone. So I thought they had made some kind of arrangement that that was going to stay there for the purposes of securing the building, but now I notice it is not there anymore. And we should inquire of the property owners to find out why. The next red one is Century Manor. I had to report this last one and I forgot. We heard good news from Inwell that they're going to be redeveloping the property and the property is going to most likely flourish under their ownership. The formal Friday Church, the owners are opposing, this is 2251 Robert Road East. The formal Friday Church, as the staff knows, the owners are opposing designation, which I don't think is a good sign, not very nice of them. And 56 York Boulevard, 63 McNabb, The Copley buildings, or like they call it, the commercial block, which was built under. Core Urban is planning on doing a major overhaul of it to repurpose the buildings. Apartments in the newer part, boutique hotel in the older part, putting the slate back on the roof. I'm looking forward to seeing all the stuff come through permit review so we can understand what their plans are. I think it's going to be a fantastic use of the building. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Did staff have any updates in regards to those updates?
Through the chair, so in terms of the long and busy building at 828 Sanatorium, Graham had passed along, or through an email chain in terms of the trespass issue, that was passed along to municipal law enforcement, but the information about the security features being removed and monitoring is new, so I'll be sure to pass that along to MLE as well and to follow up with the owners.
Thank you for those updates, Graham. Karen, you're next.
Thank you. I have just one update. Last month, I brought to the attention of the committee about 2 Hat Street in Dundas. There was a lot of broken windows and there was some plywood, but it was still very open to the elements, especially the big window at the one end. And I'm happy to say that there have been 3 more pieces of plywood put up, and they are on the outside of the building, so it does look a little more protected against the weather, so that's a good sign. But I am still very concerned about the building itself. It really doesn't feel like anybody's taking care of it, and I'm looking forward to it being designated, hopefully, in the near future. Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, so staff are in the process of finalizing our report and recommendations to designate. Right now, I believe we are targeting April, at the April meeting. We have reached out to the owner to advise them of that recommendation. We haven't heard back yet. We've been working closely with municipal law enforcement staff about some of these property standards issues, like Karen mentioned. And also in the meantime, we have asked our colleagues in building inspections to also take a look to make sure there aren't any other concerns that we should be aware of beyond property standards.
Thank you for that. Are there any other property updates from members? Go ahead, Councillor.
Yeah, just about the former James Street Baptist Church right by City Hall. I just wanted to let folks know really briefly that there's new owners after the receivership process has wrapped. And actually, I'll be leaving this meeting 1 p.m. to have a meeting with the new owners to talk to them about the various things we've brought up here, right? Specifically about what can be done to maintain the property. I've heard from city staff, as we did at our last meeting, I believe, that some good efforts are being made there to secure it, to make sure that there's, I'm looking for the word here, scaffolding, I think is the word I'm looking for, of different kinds to be able to access the heritage features inside to make sure that they're maintained and can be inspected more thoroughly. And I'm actually hoping to see if there's any possibility, if the interior is safe enough, to hold some type of an event there or tour so folks can get a look inside. It's been many, many years since anyone from the public has had
It looks like we lost Councillor Crutch there for a moment. Well, I want to thank him for that update, and hopefully that's some good news, and the project will move forward. Are there any other updates, comments, questions? If not, may I have a mover and a seconder to receive the updates?
I see Graham and Lynn.
And as we move to vote, is there anyone opposed? Hello, Councillor.
Yeah, sorry, I think I vanished momentarily there. Sorry, I don't know what happened. Just the internet got mad. But yeah, I was just saying that hopefully the grading at the back can happen. And that was the last thing I was going to say.
No, that'll be a good meeting, hopefully, and things are looking more positive. And we had our mover and our seconder to receive, and we were just moving to vote. Is there anyone opposed to receiving? Seeing none, that item is carried. We'll now move on to 11.4, which will be further updates, Graham, that you had asked for at the beginning of the meeting. If you want to just we'll go through one by one. So if you want staff update.
Is there any more updates on the mayor's motion for vacant buildings.
Through the chair, so as indicated, I believe at the previous meeting, the direction is for a preliminary report back by Q1 2025. Our team has been consulted as a part of that, which is being led by municipal law enforcement and building staff. So I do understand that that report is forthcoming, should be coming up soon.
We talked about it earlier, but Councillor Kazar's motion on Mark Filippo House moving onto city property.
Yeah, through the chair. So at General Issues Committee, Wednesday of this week, there was a motion moved and passed to direct staff to explore the feasibility of potentially taking on the Mar House if it cannot be retained in its current location or on another location facing Wilson Street as a part of that proposed redevelopment. As folks might be already familiar, there's an approved heritage permit to move the building onto a more secluded portion of the property that does not have any direct relationship to Wilson Street. So this motion was essentially directing staff to explore what that could look like. It had indicated that the cost to actually move the building would be handled by the developer themselves, but looking at whether there's potential to move it on a city property within the village core, like Ancaster Memorial Arts Center property, and what that might mean in terms of long-term maintenance, tenants, so that sort of thing. So just an exploratory direction to be able to investigate what that would look like.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Verlison. So now the Sandhouse, the medical superintendent's residence at 650 Sanatorium. Has there been any updates on that? Any word on what's going to happen?
Through the chair, nothing that I am aware of, and my apologies just with the short notice on that. I'd have to take a look to see where things are left off, but if I recall correctly, it is listed on the register and on our list of candidates for designation, but I'd need to double check where that is in our process.
Yeah, I'll bring it up next month, though. I'll remind you. And now the former eternity ward at 711 Concession Street. I have been awful quiet in the news, and it wasn't for a while. So it's kind of what's going on. Have they been contacting any but staff to what's going on there?
Through the chair, so I believe, I can't recall which member had asked about this last meeting, but I think I had provided an update, just that we haven't received anything yet, but we understand that Infrastructure Ontario is working with Hamilton Health Sciences and is working on the Cultural Heritage Impact Assessment. So as this committee might recall, we had seen the findings of the Cultural Heritage Assessment that was conducted through the help of Infrastructure Ontario. The heritage firm had presented on that and provided the full reports for this committee's information, confirming that yes, the property does have heritage value and is worthy of being designated. And the next step is conducting a cultural heritage impact assessment to understand what the proposed site works are, how that would impact that heritage value, and to come up with, from our perspective, obviously looking for an alternative where we can retain that building in situ and integrate it into whatever works are necessary on the site.
And then the last one about the report in the provincial planning statement. Was it just to do with the carving out of property from designated properties, or is it more to that report?
Through the chair, so I might need some further clarification on that. There were, I'm trying to think of now, maybe 6 different reports that staff provided last year on policy changes. The one regarding the new provincial planning statement, we had indicated at an earlier stage that there might be a report back if we needed to make any policy changes or take any action to address the impacts of it. But at this point, there is nothing that we've flagged in terms of necessary amendments on the heritage planning side of things resulting from that. So I think that's the one that you're referring to?
Yes, it's from September, yes.
So yeah, at this point, there's no staff report pending related to that.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you for bringing those forward, Graham, and thank you for that clarification, Alyssa. Are there any other updates or new business, any updates from staff?
Through the chair, happy to announce that we have a new staff member starting on Monday. As this committee is aware, Scott recently moved into the cultural heritage planner role and his planning tech position had been vacant. And we've just hired Kira Cook, who actually works over in tourism culture at the moment. And she'll be joining us on Monday to fill that vacancy as our new planning technician.
That's great news. That's good. Very good. All right. May I have a mover and a seconder? Oh, you don't want to? No, you're good for that? Okay. We'll just go to adjourn. If there's no further business, the Hamilton Municipal Heritage Committee is now adjourned at 1:01. Our next meeting will be Friday, March 28th at 12 o'clock. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and have a great month. We'll see you next month.